Hello and welcome to the Sobet Punks podcast. This is episode 88 of the podcast, which is about meaning, transcendence, awe, and spirituality with a small s. I am Dave.
And I am Siobhan. You sound like a proper radio DJ there.
I feel like I went
Tony Blackburn.
I went through a range of emotions. I was trying to do all the different versions of Dave that I could do.
They're all very positive emotions, which is nice.
Good, I'm glad. Well, you join us on an auspicious occasion because, as I said, this is episode 88, and we're doing another episode about the Eightfold Path.
Ooh.
So I don't know if 3 8s are. Is there any magical quality to the number 8?
It's an infinity symbol if you turn it on its side.
It's an infinity symbol.
Yeah.
That's good.
Other than that, I have nothing.
The other reason that this is an auspicious occasion is because we've both just eaten cake.
Yeah.
It was quite fairly delicious, but we should probably admit, I don't mind admitting, I'm pretty sure it turned out not to be very gut healthy.
I'm not sure it would be classed as food.
Might be the worst thing I've eaten in the last year.
It was so bad.
I mean, delicious, but the worst, you know.
Yeah, wherever we went.
Wherever we went.
Well, the
I'm not going to name and shame.
Yeah, well, the place we went to did a really nice dinner or lunch, whatever, and all very freshly made and all very lovely. And then there was cakes behind the little counters.
Oh, they looked delicious, ladies and gentlemen. Delicious they looked.
They did look really nice. But, I mean, I should have known because some of those cakes are in every cafe, so they definitely get them from, like...
You tell me this now,
place.
after we
the
already
orange
had
cake
it.
was definitely from somewhere else, but anyway. And so I went up to ask for some cake, thinking they'll bring it over on a plate, and they brought it over in a bag, ready to go. And
it's like, only... fuck off, guys.
But it's only now that we've eaten it at home and found that it was basically dust in the form of cake that we realised they didn't want us to eat that in front of them. Because it's just like, oh God, they've ordered cake, better send it to go. Don't want to see their faces once they've had that.
We did spend most of the meal talking about gut health as well, didn't we?
Yeah.
So if they heard us.
Maybe.
Maybe it was that. They were like, oh no. I know that's got Cocoa Pops on
it. Yeah. And this one looks like cake, but when you hit it with a fork, it just goes...
I don't know. For the radio listener, I'm here and I don't know what that was.
It was just not really cake. It was just kind of like thin matter in the shape of a cake until you touched it.
Anyhow, so we're both full to the fucking brim of sugar
and
and chemicals that our bodies aren't used to. So this could go horribly wrong, or we could both be asleep halfway through. We'll find out.
High off of weird chemicals that we haven't put in our body for a while. Who knows?
You're about to find out.
Yeah.
We don't advertise this podcast on social media, and we don't really advertise it at all, although maybe we will at some point in the future. But if you would like to tell your friends about it, feel free to do so. If you think they would be interested, that would be fantastic and help us out a great deal. Yeah. You can contact us on shamcityroasters@gmail.com if anything we're about to talk about or anything we have talked about is of comment.
Yeah, good and bad. You know, tell us what we do know, tell us what we don't know, tell us where to look. We are learning, and that's the whole point. So
yeah. That being said, we like to start this podcast with a discussion about what we have done over the last couple of weeks, which has filled our lives with a sense of transcendence and awe and spirituality with a small s and meaning. I always do those in a different order.
Yeah.
And Siobhan always likes to go first, so I would like her to go first.
Fantastic. I'm going to try and be brief because if I try and describe this properly, I'm going to do myself a disservice. So this is more just a pointer.
Welcome to the
people.
Sober Punks podcast, ladies and
gentlemen. I've learned about something this week that I really, really like. I keep finding these things that make human beings feel small, and I think we should feel small, but not in a nihilistic sort of way, in a kind of we're not that big and important sort of kind of way. Not to dismiss the harm that we have on the world and on the planet, but just in this kind of humans think that they're brilliant and there is nothing better than human consciousness wise. So I picked up this tiny little book when we were in, I want to say Folkestone. There was a bookshop in Folkestone, which was a really cool bookshop. It was massive actually, and it was definitely a very deliberately curated bookshop. It was really nice. Can't think what it was called, but you should go there wherever it was in Folkestone.
But don't go to this restaurant that we went to that we haven't told you about either.
Yeah, which is full of facts. Anywho, it's a tiny little book called Gaia and Philosophy, written by Lynn Margulis and Dorian Sagan. And it's about this concept called Gaia. There's this thing called the Gaia hypothesis that was created by Lynn Margulis, along with, and I think he was the main person to do it, was this guy called James Lovelock. He was an atmospheric chemist, and in the 70s, him and Lynn Margulis, who is a microbiologist, they developed the Gaia theory. Embracing the circular logic of life and engineering systems, the Gaia theory states that Earth is a self-regulating complex system in which life interacts with and eventually becomes its own environment. Gaia describes a living Earth, a body in the form of a planet. For billions of years, life has created an environment conducive to its continuation, influencing the physical attributes of Earth on a planetary scale. An idea with precedents in natural science and philosophy for the millennia, Gaia resonates with the ancient magico-religious understanding that all is one, as above, so below. The thing that I like about this the most, if that made no sense, absolutely fine. I mean, I read it and thought, ooh, that sounds completely mad. I want to read about it. The basic theory is the Earth has been around for billions and billions and billions of years and is still going. Humankind has been here for something like 0.00002% of all of that time, in our like 50,000 year history, or maybe longer.
50,000 years?
I think it's like that. It's probably longer than that.
Yeah, I think it's much longer than that, isn't it?
I don't know how much longer than that it is. It's not. I can't think like where the Paleolithic and Neolithic all that starts, but it's a tiny, tiny amount of time. Humankind, whilst we are ruining the Earth and probably accelerating its, problems that we're having, the Earth has managed to regulate itself for years and years and years and years and years. There's loads of science behind it. I absolutely can't pretend to even know what it could even mean. But one of the things this book pointed out was the Earth is heating up, the sun is expanding, and thus the Earth should have heated up far beyond the temperature it has. But somehow the Earth always kind of regulates its temperature to about 20 degrees either way, whereas it should be, the oceans should have boiled or something to that effect. Every ice age, the planet has survived, something like that. So again, I can't really describe it better than that, and that probably doesn't make any sense. But the thing that I really take from it, that I really like, is that humankind is really teeny tiny and small, and we should probably think bigger. I think the people who made this hypothesis were they saw it as an incredibly positive thing, not a nihilistic thing, not an excuse for climate change either. They very much agree that climate change is a thing, but their attitude is one of adaptability rather than that we can stop it. Their opinion is we may have started something that's quite bad, however, to stop it, we're silly to think that we can stop it. It's a whole planet that's dealing with this thing. We've just given it something to deal with. It actually speaks of human.
The planet is bigger than we are, so our egos would suggest that we've made this problem so we can sort it out.
Yes.
But actually, in reality, we are fleas.
Yes.
Scuttling around.
100%. And
it's not just the planet; it's the universe too, right? I assume.
Well, so there's some. I can't explain what their theory is, but I think the idea that a self-regulating planet such as ours exists, I think they're just to the extent that this could be happening elsewhere. The whole one thing that James Lovelock was doing in the 70s was also helping
acid
people.
Any chance?
Potentially acid.
I assume.
He lived a really long time. I think he died in his hundreds. Like it was 103 I think he was when he died. It was quite recent. But yeah, he was part of the people that were sending probes to Mars back in the 70s, or debating whether to send things to Venus, all this sort of thing. But he was very positive about the idea of looking for all these things, but very much sensible, thinking of adaptation as opposed to that humankind can do anything about what they've done. And this links to loads of the stuff about consciousness. We understand consciousness only from a humankind perspective, and we poo-poo all other versions of it to the point where we say these things don't have consciousness. One thing that the Gaia hypothesis talks about is, and this is where it starts to sound like people on acid, the Earth being a living thing. We're covered in these microorganisms that have been around for years and years and years and millions of years, keeping this Earth, from getting too hot, from getting too cold, from getting too gaseous with the wrong gases. Something they said was there's loads of gases in the air that should be reacting to each other and depleting each other, but they don't. And they're not trying to explain why that happens. They're just saying it does happen. So the Earth is regulating itself somehow. whether we agree that this is real or not, I just really like the idea that humankind's are really, really small. We're not that clever. We're not that important. And we should get over ourselves. I like it.
Is there a spiritual side to this, in as much as if you look at the world as a living being and everything all existing as one thing, sort of playing itself out almost, that thing is what kind of God is? God is a metaphor for that.
Yeah, I think it's 100% that. I can't remember where they got the word Gaia from, but I think it means Mother Earth in something. It's all kind of spiritually based. The person who actually came up with the word was William Golding, who was his neighbour.
Lord of the Flies.
Yeah,
oh.
He's the one that called it Gaia. It does link to that kind of like spirituality sort of, all is one. So whether we call one God or whether we call it Gaia or whether we just call it one, the idea that we all feed into this system, that we are not bigger than it is massive and we're just a tiny part of it, that the earth can definitely do without, as it has done. I see the earth is trying to get rid of me. It has done for the millions and billions of years that the earth existed before we did. But it definitely was just provoking my brain in a really positive way. I think I can see how people would see things like that and just be like, holy fuck, we mean nothing. I can see where like absurdity comes from, and I don't know, existentialism and all that sort of stuff. But I love it. I think we should all embrace the fact that we're pointless.
You, the listener, are pointless.
We are literally not a big deal.
Would like you to know on this auspicious occasion.
Literally not important in the slightest. I love it. I absolutely love it. David Cullen. What have you done in the last couple of weeks that's brought your life a sense of spirituality? Oh, I've done it in the wrong order. Spirituality, meaning, transcendence and awe. And also spirituality with a small s.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Spirituality times 2.
Well, mine isn't quite as highfalutin as yours. Elizabeth Oldfield, who we've talked about on this podcast a number of times, she wrote a book called Fully Alive, which I would very much recommend. And we went and saw her talk with John Vervaeke, and we talked about that as well. So she should be known to you all. And she recently interviewed Caitlin Moran, and I watched it, and it was largely based on a book that Caitlin Moran wrote about 2 years ago, I think now, maybe even a bit more than that, called What About Men? And I read that book at the time, and really, really loved it. And I don't think I've talked about it on this podcast at all. And honestly, probably the reason, I don't think I've talked about it very much with anybody. And probably the reason is because I think it's not, I don't know, it's a subject matter which I'm a little bit fearful of treading, I suppose, in a way. But I watched this interview between these two. And it just brought to mind all of the things that I really loved about the book, which I've kind of just left alone for the last couple of years. And the book itself was really panned, I think, for the most part. Certainly in all of the reviews, but I think also online and what have you, by almost every side. And it's interesting because when Caitlin Moran talks about it, so Caitlin Moran, just on the very small chance that you don't know who she is a kind of pop feminist, I suppose, for want of a better description. And it certainly 10, 15 years ago was like the pop feminist.
Yeah, the one.
And wrote a bunch of books about feminism, which were very mainstream, funny. She's very entertaining, but also, very much a feminist, and has written all of these books. And she wrote this book fundamentally because she found that often when she was this question, what about men, was being asked to her more and more largely by mothers who had sons. So she kept getting asked this question and didn't really have an answer for it. So she decided to write this book about it. It was panned by men. Or like from a male perspective, I suppose, because most of the reviews said it was too simplistic and it was just assuming that all men were one thing and it was too sort of light. And it was also panned, and she talks about that quite a lot, that like most men really didn't like the book. But what I actually saw at the time was much more the opposite side of that, which was a lot of women saying this book is dangerous. You shouldn't be talking about this sort of thing. You know, this is not a subject that you should be talking about. I mean, I think both sides of that are absurd. The reason I think the male argument is absurd is because it's very much a pop book. It's not an academic treatise. There are unquestionably some sort of assumptions and some generalizations without question, but the generalizations are all there. I don't want to say necessarily in a metaphorical way, but they all sum something up that it's one of those things where we all know that what she's talking about. Yes, she's being simplistic about it, but we also know that there's some worth in it. So you can pick holes in that and you say, well, I'm not like that. So how dare you say that all men are this way? When actually that's just bullshit, because you know she's not actually saying every single man in the entire world is this way. And then on the other side, I mean, I think it was bizarre, the amount, and like she doesn't mention this at all, but the amount of things that I saw in this saying that this book was like somehow dangerous and somehow awful and somehow like really putting an boot in the feminist cause was kind of absurd, because the book is really caring and not in any way sort of male rightsy or anything. It's coming from a very feminist perspective. More or less the argument is the patriarchy is harming men as well as women, and specifically, maybe very specifically, and I think the thing that touched me most about the book is about boys, young boys, basically, how boys are being brought up. Now, this subject in recent years, and I think this is why the interview happened, has sort of blown up into popular culture because of something which I haven't seen, but my understanding is that Netflix made a documentary about sort of the whole Andrew Tate thing and incel culture and this sort of stuff. And I believe that Keir Starmer said that he wanted it shown in schools, and this was like a really... Like so I'm sure everybody listening knows more about that than I do, because I don't follow these things at all. But that's about as much as I know about it. And I haven't seen the documentary. I'm not critiquing the documentary, but everything I've heard about it sounds like it's coming from a very specific place, which is basically like, oh my God, this is all going wrong with young boys, and this is really awful. And I think, to me anyway, and again, I haven't seen the thing, but it sounds like too simplistic of a message, and also not really very empathetic to their potentially the reasons why this is happening. It's ignoring the reasons for it, and it's just saying, oh, we're creating this whole generation of boys who are basically rapey and awful.
Yeah, and isn't it more of a thing to say that Andrew Tate's popularity or the popularity at that time is a symptom of something?
Well, that's what I would argue, yes. But
that's rather than the problem. Like, it's a symptom of like, oh, why on earth do boys feel a connection to this horrible human being and everything they stand for? Not the fact that they do. It's like, why? Which I guess is that was what I got from Kayla Moran's book.
Well, yeah, exactly. Which I think is at the very least a worthwhile discussion to be had.
100%. Because Andrew Tate will get locked up in prison, hopefully, and then
I think he already has been. I mean, he's out again, I think.
But the next person who's awful will come along with those views, and unless we address why he's popular. Popular.
And I think it risks as well. It has the stench of the satanic panic about it a little bit, in as much as I think that most of the findings are, and this isn't a good thing, and I'm not excusing. I'm not saying that this is fine, but most of the boys that are finding Andrew Tate are very young, and they're all growing out of it by the time they're getting to an age where they're going to be moving into adulthood or whatever. Yeah. Now, I mean, that's a very generalised statement that I'm making, but I've certainly read that. As a possibility, and so on some levels, as with every kind of ogre of culture, there's some truth in it, of course, and it's not something that we shouldn't be discussing, but we should also not be saying, oh my God, every single boy is into Andrew Tate, this is a disaster for the world, because clearly the world isn't that simple, and clearly nothing is that simple. Anyway, the point is that I would really recommend this discussion. You'll be able to find it if you type in any of those names, or probably What About Men. And I would really recommend the book as well. And I think it annoys me slightly that it kind of, I think it got looked over a lot. And I think it never. I think it sold quite well, but I don't think it really found an audience. And And as a result of both, the potential readers, both of them finding something wrong with it. And I think that it's a really empathetic discussion. And the reason that I think that is, frankly, because it was a subject that I'd never really thought about myself. And I like Kayla Moran, and I'd read her previous books. And that's really why I got the book. Not because I was thinking to myself, what about men? Hold on a minute. And as I read the book, I found it incredibly touching, because I didn't actually realise how much of the stuff that and I can't go through it all, but how much of the stuff that she discussed in it was actually stuff that had really had sort of subconsciously somewhere in my system been bothering me. And how, and again, this is a few years ago now, when I was probably not in a particularly great place, and how much the culture around me was making me feel like I didn't have a role anywhere and didn't have anywhere to go. Now, of course, there's an argument to say, well, you're a straight white man, fuck you, don't really care. But there is a reality going on at the moment where a huge amount of people who look like me and are my age are killing themselves. There is a huge amount of problems with young boys. They're doing very poorly in education. They're all addicted to porn. They're not flourishing in any way. Not getting jobs when they leave school. And I think that we're doing a real disservice to that generation. Now, I'm sure we're doing a disservice to that generation of girls too. And I'm sure that, there can be, but it's not a zero-sum game. It's not that let's let girls do better and that as a result of that, boys have to do worse. I think that everybody can do well. And I don't think that we should be looking at any generation and just writing off any group.
Yeah.
Really. Yeah, so the book itself really touched me at the time, but I didn't know what to do with it, because I thought if I sort of go on about this and start talking to people about it, then I'm going to come across like I'm Fathers for Justice or something, and I'm not. I'm not that. I know I don't fit into that group.
Yeah.
But yeah, it sort of opened my eyes to. So I don't know. I mean, I think it's maybe a subject that we'll deal with more on this podcast, possibly.
Yeah.
But I would recommend both.
Very lovely. I do remember reading it and finding it really, really, really eye-opening. Like you say, nothing like wildly profound, but just things that weren't being discussed because no one felt like they should discuss it, which is horrible, really, isn't it? Like a whole group of people. No, I don't think anyone should ever be marginalised for any reason. And I know, like, I hate when people go, history has favoured these people. Okay, so we should raise the other people up, but not like completely. It's like you said, it shouldn't be that like, boys have always done well in school, so now girls should do well in school. We should be raising everything up so that everyone's getting the best they can, not you've had it so good for all of history, so you should actually have it worse now. There's not room for everyone to have it good. There is room for everyone to have it good. Yeah,
100%. But also a couple of things. Boys haven't always done that well in school, but as a result of outright sexism, they've always ended up doing all right in life without needing to do all that well at school. So
true.
The problem's actually been there for ages, but it's just that in a weird sort of way, sexism has kind of maintained, has actually given them I absolutely accept my male privilege when I grew up, because I'm 45. In the 90s, there's no question that I got opportunities that I wouldn't have got if I was a girl. And I'm not saying that doesn't exist at all now, at all, but I'm just saying, like, that's not the same. It runs into this problem of, particularly if you're talking about boys, like little boys sometimes, it runs into this problem of someone that looked like you 100 years ago did really well out of looking like you, so you're going to get punished for it. And that's not fair. Like, there's nothing that child has done. I never forget this story. I don't think, I definitely haven't told it on the podcast. I was at work and somebody came in and was asking about a book, and it was like a kid's book for her son. And she said, I have to check to make sure it's here, because we're coming in tomorrow, and he's really difficult, my son. And if I tell him that the book's here, or if he wants the book and I bring him in and he's not got it, you know that sort of, he'll react like, a classic privileged white male will react, and he'll give me this look. And I thought, well, that's a bit of a weird thing to say about your own son, A. But B, I was expecting like a teenager. When she came in, it was literally a toddler, literally like a toddler that couldn't even speak, and would have just like thrown a wobbly, because the thing that he wanted wasn't there.
Yeah, because that's what 3-year-olds do.
Because that's what a little toddler does.
Yeah.
And it was like, God, that's fucking mad. You're this child's mum, and you've just described him as a privileged white male in the context of not getting a book when he's like, I don't think he was even 3. I mean, he was literally like barely out of a pram. And I was like, that's fucking mental. You're now going to bring that child up.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know. Maybe some people listening to this will be thinking, "Yeah, fucking right," but I don't see how you can.
What happens when the feminist has a son? Like, I guess that's why Caitlin Moran's getting all these questions. Like, totally for you, Caitlin, but shit, I had sons. Now what? Like,
yeah.
That's why she wrote this book. Fucking hell, that's horrible. So, as Dave mentioned earlier, this is our second episode about the Eightfold Path. If you want to know more about that, then listen to the last week's episode where we discuss it, and we discuss the first step, which was right view. So today we are discussing the next one. There's a variety of different ways to set it out, but we're setting it out in the way that was most common in the books we've got. So the next step would be right thought.
Well, yeah, we actually, I think it's different depending on what book you're looking at. So we did say last time that we weren't going to get into semantics, because all of these things are interpreted in different ways. So often the words in Pali mean like 10 different things, and those 10 different things. I think of all of them, this is probably the one where those different meanings might end up coming into it a little bit. Yeah,
I think there's value in quite a lot of the different versions of this. So right thought is the kind of more general way to look at it. But
right intention is the one that, so when we were doing this, it's only just become clear to me that right thought is the one that we're using, because most of the books that I read were all right intention.
Oh, okay. And I've got a couple that say right attitude of mind
and right motivation and right resolve is another one. Yeah.
Oh, hello.
And all of those words are quite similar, but they also kind of all mean really different things, particularly in certain contexts. So we're not going to get too much into that semantic stuff.
There's a pretty good quote in the Christmas Humphreys book on Buddhism that describes a little bit about right thinking. And he just says, as someone wittingly remarked, I don't know who he's referring to, maybe himself, to be honest.
Well, no one, there is no selves in Buddhism.
There you go. Well, that's
someone is everyone or no one.
He said, we are not what we think we are, but what we think we are. Which is a bit like
that sounds
all the quotes
very similar. So we did talk about the fact that possibly the Eightfold Path is going to be a way in which we can pull all of the different random shit that we've talked about over the past, I don't know how long, 20 episodes into one thing. That is the same as Kurt Vonnegut's quote that we used a lot, which is be careful who you pretend to be, because you are who you pretend to be.
Yeah. No, it kind of all. I love when everything just kind of like matches together in that respect. He talks about also, just to throw another right in there, he also calls it right desire, which I think leads to motivation and intention, and probably more of the ones that you've got in your
I don't know
books.
that. I'm not sure it does lead to those. I think it just throws another bloody
spanner
in the works.
I know. But he talks about it in kind of two facets. And these two facets come up in quite a few of the books that I've got, which is about doing it in a positive way and a negative way. So it's about doing things positively for the sake of the good, rather than doing things to avoid certain things. Again, aversion and craving are thoughts and come up within the Goenka kind of thing. Goenka also talks about ways to form this is doing things with a positive mindset, but also he introduces some precepts, which are the banishing of certain things. So it's trying to have right thought, but doing it in a positive way, and also negative, which is, sensory, not having things, in order to ensure that you have right thinking. So I feel like the Buddhists were really, really damn practical when it came to this one, with all the different ways in which they could ensure they have right thought.
Yeah, I do think it is a very practical one. So last episode we talked about right view, which was much more, I don't know whether we really encapsulated this, but it is much more kind of highfalutin.
Yeah.
So the way that I view this, rightly or wrongly, but I think is quite a good way of trying to understand it, is that right view is kind of the subconscious aspect of what it's that thing of what you put in is what comes out, and kind of get using meditation and using whatever you can use to kind of get the things that you're not really aware of in line, so that you can build on that. I feel like right thinking or right intention is what you then do with that, and it's a bit more conscious.
Yeah, I think so. And I think they go back and forth, don't they? I mean, this is step 2 in our version that we're telling over the next over these 8 episodes. But in the Goenka tradition of learning Vipassana, this is the step. This is step 7. This is everything you do will then lead you to right thought. And then actually our step last week, which was right view, is actually what he would put last. Like all of this builds upon, and they're all, it's, you know, it's a feedback loop it's like an 8-point feedback loop that I don't know what word you even use to describe that. But he quite clearly sees it the other way round. So I know it can be arguable from all sorts of ways, but I do think you're right in saying that this is kind of the practical one. This is definitely the one that within the meditation that we learn when we are thinking about, or trying not to think, but when we're dealing with thoughts of craving and thoughts of aversion, that's pretty much the main thing you're working with within the realm of the meditation practice.
Yeah.
And by doing that, you realize that these things aren't real, or they aren't the things to attach to. And so Thich Nhat Hanh describes, he reframes a Descartes quote for this very purpose. Descartes having said, "I think, therefore I am," he would argue, "I think, therefore I am not."
You don't exist, ladies and gentlemen. You do not exist.
And I think what he's trying to say is every thought you have isn't actually the real you. And you, by the practices of mindfulness and by, you know, invoking all parts of the Eightfold Path, it's with the point to realize that thinking isn't actually the thing to do, and to get to what's real, you know, your thoughts on it isn't the real. It's about how to find the way to be really present.
So Brad Warner uses more of the term resolve. So this kind of is almost like on a slightly different wavelength, I suppose, but I think they do all mean the same thing fundamentally at their heart. So he talks about the fact that a lot of people talk about their or right intent is the other one. So so right intent suggests that if you intend to do good, then that's what right intention is. Yeah. But actually he points out that there's a difference between intending to do good and actually doing good. And I think that there's something in there about, so we can all pretend to be trying to be good people. We can all say that we're trying to be good people. We can all say that we care about certain things, say that we're doing certain things in the name of being good people. But actually there's what this actually is, and what the right action is, actions later, what the right thinking is to actually put that stuff into practice, and actually be.
Yeah, I guess that's where it all. Sorry for the listener, I'm waving my hand around trying to describe that everything interacts with each other. So you're trying not to say right action, but these things, you can't really speak about one without speaking about the others, and that's the whole point. It's not just a 1 to 8, it is that every single one affects all the other ones.
Yeah.
So yeah, trying not to say right action is fine, but you're right in the kind of like the trip there.
But so what he says is, what is right resolve? Being resolved on renunciation, on freedom from ill will, on harmlessness. This is called right resolve. That's from the Pali. In this case, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to become a monk or nun, but that you should have the mindset of a monk or nun. You should renounce the things of the world, renounce ill will, and resolve to be harmless. Another way of looking at this is that you should have the resolve or intention of following the Noble Eightfold Path. So fundamentally what this is doing the thing.
Yeah.
That it's getting a bit meta.
Yeah.
What right thinking is thinking the Eightfold Path all the time.
But right view was that as well. Like right view is really understanding the Eightfold Path. But right view is part of the Eightfold Path. Yeah. So again, that's another.
Welcome to
meta.
Buddhism.
There's a bit of Thich Nhat Hanh describes 4 different methods to achieving right thinking. One of them is called "Are you sure?", which is where your immediate thought is probably not correct. He actually describes 2 different thoughts, your initial thought and the thought you develop. And he's saying, actually, neither of these are correct. Both of them are wrong view. And so doing meditation gets rid of them both in slightly different ways. So are you sure is correcting initial thought. It's like, it describes you see a rope, but your monkey brain thinks it's a snake. It's about checking in with yourself about your initial thoughts. There's definitely right side, left side. I mean, everything we tried to describe last week, system 1, system 2, there's lots of different explanations of brain that support that. The second one is a bit like what you were just saying, and it's called What Am I Doing? And it's to try and get someone to be in the moment. So to try and, if you can be in the moment, you can then have correct intention. So for example, and you're going to love this description, he describes the washing up.
Oh, nice.
And he describes when you are really there, washing the dishes can be a deep and enjoyable experience. But if you wash them whilst thinking about other things, you are wasting your time. You're probably not washing the dishes well. And if you are not there, even if you wash 84,000 dishes, your work will be without merit. And so he's trying to say the things you really intend to do with right thought, with right intention, are the things that will serve you well. However, left hand, right hand way of thinking, you shouldn't go into something with the intention of it serving you well. So the other example he gives is of the Bodhidharma, which is the person who founded Zen Buddhism in China. The emperor at the time asked him how much merit that they've earned because they've built all these temples all over the country. And the Bodhidharma said, well, absolutely none. Whereas what he's trying to say is, you've made me build all these temples and yeah, they're going to serve a purpose, but it doesn't give me any merit because I'm just doing the thing. However, doing one thing with pure intention could then end in giving you merit, but you shouldn't go into it trying to get merit. It's a real it's a really hard thing to describe. This is where the Tao stuff comes in. Like the path to the way is not the way, or I don't know what they there's lots of kind of weird, almost like Zen koan-y things. Is like any description of the way is not the way. So trying to say do something positive and it'll give you merit, but if you go into it wanting merit, you've already gone in with wrong intention, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, so much of this I suppose rings a bell probably in most people's heads about just the basics of as we understand mindfulness in more of a secular way.
Yeah.
But I think it twists it a little bit. So in many ways, the secular version of mindfulness is if you can be in the moment, then it will make that moment better for you.
Yeah.
Right. And I suppose that is what this is describing. But that's why intention and thinking are kind of the same thing in this context, because actually what it's about is your intention is the thing that is going to make the thing you're doing better for you.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
It definitely does. I think this is why when I never really understood it before, and I think I'm only just starting to get to the grips with it now. When I always would have called this Buddhist Puritans, complaining that mindfulness was taken out of the Eightfold Path, and taking mindfulness out is just you're not going to understand it. But this is the way that it makes sense to me. You know, if you exactly how you described it, if you're doing mindfulness in order for you to have a better experience, then you've missed out right thinking. And all of these things do influence each. It sounds like semantics in a way. There might be some people listening just going, Jesus Christ, really? But it does make sense. In the
trust
long
me,
run.
guys, what we're saying does make sense.
I don't know how to describe it better, but I feel like it should be simple to understand that if you do something with the intention of it serving yourself, then you've not done a selfless thing. Yeah. It's still egotistical, it's still self-serving, and the whole point of this is that may come, but it cannot be your reason for doing something. Your reason for doing something should be more noble than that.
Yeah. And so let's maybe move out the books for a bit and just think about that as an idea. One of the things about this is that it's about not being selfish, right? I mean, in that context. So it's about doing things for other people. But it's also the intention of why you would do things for those other people. And I think that one of the things that I've learned most from Buddhism is, and which is an idea which I think exists in a lot of different places, is that by doing the right thing with other people in mind is better for you. You're going to feel better about it than if you do the sort of selfish thing.
Yeah.
So I think we live in a society where we're encouraged, and this is particularly true of money and capitalism, right? So we live in a society where we're encouraged to sort of put our own needs first, everything is understood through. It's completely understood if I make a decision which kind of fucks over a few people if it makes me some money. That's me being successful in a lot of, particularly in the business world. But I think in our lives generally, a lot of the time.
I think it's just become a very normal version of success, hasn't it? Like we wouldn't even give it a second thought. Yeah,
well, it comes back to that zero-sum thing again that we were talking about about Caitlin Moran about the what about men thing. It's like if you're in a band, right? So if you're in a band, it's like we're doing better than this other band who are similar to us.
Yeah.
And let's fuck them over. Let's try and get more gigs than them, or let's try and do better than them, or I'm annoyed because I'm lower on the bill. That's an ideal one actually. That's a really good example. Really, it's like I've never really understood this, but people sort of being annoyed because they're lower on the bill than another band,
but then that annoys everyone loses.
But everyone loses, but also I think what this is talking about is one step up from that. So you can see that as kind of this petty silly thing that but if you're a person that your inner world gets annoyed about, using this as an example, if your inner world gets annoyed about being second on the bill when you think you should be third on the bill, even though anybody else with any sort of with any sort of distance from the situation would know it makes no difference whatsoever, and often particularly in like DIY circles, literally makes no difference.
No one's going to remember they even went to that gig.
Well, that, and also headliner means nothing. Being third or second.
In fact,
or whatever.
Sometimes it's the worst place to be because everyone just wants to go.
But the thing is, it's about what you then. It's about two things. It's about one, what that means your inner world is doing. Mm-hmm. So this is where I think right view comes in this context. Just again, this is not really Buddhism, but this is kind of, we're trying to use very practical examples. So what right view does is if you don't really care about that sort of stuff, then it immediately removes loads of stress. So I would argue that if I go to a gig and there's another band on the bill and they're all grumpy and they're pissed off because they're lower down on the bill or whatever, my gut feeling, my initial reaction to that is, oh, you bunch of pricks, right? But actually, fundamentally, that shouldn't really be my gut feeling. What my gut feeling should be, and I think has become more and more so as I work through things like the Eightfold Path more, is to feel just really sorry for them. Because fundamentally, it's like, that is a stress that you just don't need to have. So you're acting like a prick, but you're acting like a prick and it's only affecting you. It's only ruining your life. It means that the basis of how you judge yourself is really like sad and a bit pathetic. But it also means that you get into aggravation with people, even if you're not screaming and shouting or whatever, but there's a degree of agitation and stress that you're putting on something which should be fun and that you should be enjoying, and that you've gone to a lot of effort, and it's not like you're making any money or anything. So your ego has just completely ruined the experience of doing the thing that you're doing. And I think that's where right thinking comes in.
100%.
It's kind of like saying, it's better for everybody else if I don't throw a wobbly because my band's not on the right point on this bill. But it's actually way better for me because I could just remove all of this stress. This stress doesn't have to exist
100%.
even.
I'm thinking so many different things came to mind while you were saying that. One is what you're just describing as having compassion for someone, which is the whole point of this Eightfold Path. And so you're catching your thinking, like your thinking's changed through practice. Well, you would have once been like, you stupid pricks, and now you're like, oh, I feel sorry for them. I do struggle with the difference between pity and compassion, but as I was told by a very wise Buddhist monk, and I'm sticking to it, I'm clawing to it for the rest of time. Apparently
these are the lives that we live now, Siobhan. You've had a conversation with a Buddhist monk about whether pity and compassion are the same thing,
and she told me it was. You can't pity someone without first having compassion for them. Again, I still think pity is a privileged looking down position, but she assured me it was not the case, so I'm going with it forever. No, I do question it every now and then. But so you're that's exuding compassion because of, again, not just because you just decided to change your thoughts, but you've done practice and everything has influenced each other. And yes, your thinking has changed and now your thoughts are changing and you're having a different reaction to that situation.
Well, so I think this is more or less what you just said, but just to maybe, it's that through having right view, it's led to having right thoughts. And so in order to get right view, you do all of this practice, which is quite ethereal.
Yeah.
Like meditating. We said this last time, I think. Like meditating, it doesn't really make sense that meditating would make you less stressed, because those two things seem completely separate to each other, except that we know that they're not separate to each other.
And also, on a very practical level, in meditation, you are challenging thoughts.
Yeah.
So you're challenging your thoughts to end up with the right view, to then it impacts on your thoughts again. It's all cyclical.
Yeah.
It's and not just cyclical. Like I say, there's an eight spoke freaking interconnected wheel here. Another thing that it made me think of was CBT. On a very practical psychiatric level. If you change your thought, your core, it's core belief, isn't it? You have like your core belief, which is your intuition, your deep down thought.
So core belief in this context could be, my band is better than every other band.
Yeah, and it's probably view, actually. It's probably view. It's somewhere between thought and view, which then influences your immediate thoughts, the thoughts you have on a day-to-day.
I can't believe that we're on second and this band's on third.
Exactly. And then what's the outcome of that? You feel like crap. You're horrible to the other people. They feel like crap. They're mean to you. So everyone's just crap.
The gig's rubbish. Everybody that comes to the gig who probably aren't that interested in your band anyway, don't have a very good time. And it butterfly effects out. Everyone's like, there's a ripple effect of just negativity. People stop bothering to go to DIY gigs. There you go. Then less DIY gigs happen. Ooh. Then the scene gets smaller. Commentary on the... all right. But, that's that's the eightfold path of DIY punk rock. There you go. Done, actually. Mic drop. But... yeah, if you can tackle that, if you can go right back to the beginning, and this is what the Eightfold Path says, but it's the same in CBT. If you can go and tackle that core belief, that view, which again, we know everything interconnects, but if you then change your view to, I feel a bit bad for them, that's a bit crap. Your then thoughts, what can I do for them? How can I make their existence feel a bit better today? I'll at least go out and be friendly to them, and then your behaviours are, I'll be nice to them. Maybe I'll even swap places if they want it so bad. I'll make sure I go and bring everyone in the room for their gig. And then again, the ripple effect outwards is they have a nicer time. Everyone in the room has a nicer time. And the third thing was going back to Thich Nhat Hanh's way of describing things. There's two more ones. I'll go back to the third one in a minute. But the fourth one is called bodhicitta, which is our mind of love. And so after all of this right thinking, questioning what am I doing and am I sure, all that sort of thing that I mentioned before about being present and questioning your initial thoughts, what he is saying is we should cultivate understanding in ourselves and cultivate only a loving kind of, it's not really a thought, but kind of an existence. And it carries on into, I think from here it says it carries on into right diligence, which I think will be later down the line. And again, it's another way of interconnecting everything. Well, and surely that's more or less along the lines of, if you're nice to other people, they'll be nice to you, and then you have a better experience, and then people are even nicer, and then you meet more people, and then your life gets better in that kind of circular way. Exactly, and it comes back to your framing of this one as right intention. Yeah. What he's trying to say is the other two are the other three even, I haven't gotten to the third one yet, but the other three are about catching your thinking patterns as they are, and the fourth part is about setting intention or cultivating intention of love as opposed to whatever your immediate thoughts are or whatever the habitual thinking is. And it's worth mentioning, as we're probably going to throughout this and certainly did last week, that that emphasis on love, I think has a lot to do with empathy and a lot to do with forgiveness. But also love in that context is something which exists within almost all religions. Yeah. And probably within the vast majority of myths and in the vast majority of spiritual paths that we're aware of that have ever existed across the span of time. Yeah. Is an emphasis on... And love is quite an obscure... We all know what love is. Yeah. But love is also, particularly in a spiritual context, is quite an obscure concept, isn't it? It takes me to two places. It takes me back to the Gaia thing that I was talking about earlier. And actually, I say two places, but it's arguable that this is all the same thing. Everything's the same thing, sure. I know. Nothing exists. I know. We are specks flying through the atmosphere. There's something about God is love. I hear that an awful lot, especially when... I'm going to sound horrible here, but when people pin Christians down to describe, do you believe there's a man in the sky? The way I've heard it kind of like,
and I'm going to say, like, they do kind of like, the two people I'm thinking of, one is Elizabeth Oldfield, and the other one is, that man, the big Christian man who wrote that book about making your bed.
Jordan Peterson. Yeah. Fuck me. Yeah, go on then.
Both of them.
I'm not even sure he thinks he's a Christian. I'm not really sure what he is, but go on.
A crazy man. But anyway, both of them, when pushed in interviews that I've seen.
Wow, one episode where we were asking, what about men? And Siobhan's dropping a Jordan Peterson.
I know.
Wow, fuck me.
Fascinating crying man. But both of them, when pushed, kind of wheedle out of giving an exact answer.
I think Elizabeth Oldfield's a lot clearer about. I mean, she's absolutely like a Christian that believes in God, and I mean, she's a thoughtful person too, so she's not kind of like, yes, there's a man in the sky, but she's not as obscure as fucking Jordan Peterson.
No, and he okay, maybe I'm thinking him more. He definitely tries to wheedle out of the answer, and so atheists, fucking love that stuff. But both of them do come to this kind of idea of God is love, and and everything, and then the one thing comes out of the Gaia thing, which is God is love, but God is all is one. And basically all these words end up kind of swapping places with each other. If we are all, let's go science. If we are all made of the same stuff, and consciousness is just this weird accident that, as far as we know, is only in humans, but goodness knows, Gaia saying the whole planet is a conscious being. We're all the same thing. We're all one. We're all made in God's image. We're all specks of whatever God put here, or not. There's there's just no reason to do anything but love. Like, we're all, it's caring for everyone else. It's caring for you. You are literally bits of everyone else from ancestors and ancestors. If you want to get really, but then that's still.
Oh, and your personality is pure chance.
Yeah.
Because whether it be nature or nurture, it's one or the other, and you've done nothing for that. You've just appeared, and you're just full of stuff.
Yeah.
From the people that came before you. Basically, everything you do is. Well, it depends. A lot of people would maybe argue this point, but I would probably argue, everything about your personality is not your fault. Every thought that you have, where did that thought come from? Did you have control over making that thought? Did you create that thought deliberately, or did it just appear? This is the argument
against free will. I mean, we could go there one day. I don't particularly know it, and everyone I know who argues it is really miserable. So that's the only reason I've not kind of gone down that rabbit hole. But there is something to be said for that.
That idea of the one, is that from Gaia, or is that a Tao thing?
Oh, it's everything.
So the one as well. I think I heard someone describe the one as in quite an interesting way, which might just be the way that people describe this, but it's that like bacteria are alive, but they don't understand flowers, say. So flowers exist, but they're outside of a bacteria's consciousness. Yeah. The flower exists and is alive, but they don't understand what
animals are.
Yeah, or like what a bee is, an insect, say. And then the insect exists and doesn't understand what the dog is, and the dog doesn't understand what the man is, what the one is.
I mean, he's not the only one, but
what the one is if you just keep going, right? At some point you've got to get to something above humans, and we can't possibly know what the thing above humans is.
That is what, and he can't have been the first to say it, but it's definitely the first I read of it. E.F. Schumacher, The Guide for the Perplexed, this is the entire point of his book, which was the first one that I read that made me feel small and in a positive way, is we only know everything that we can conceptualize and understand, but that doesn't mean that there's not more. And there's probably some lovely super being that's looking at us going, "You fucking idiot," in the same way we do to insects and plants. And therefore we should be nice.
This was something else that we've talked about in this podcast before, with the dog who knows 100 words.
Yes,
the dog can understand a certain amount of the English language, but he doesn't understand. He understands that if the postman comes, he needs to bark at it. Yeah. And he understands what's happened when the postman comes and something appears on the mat. Yeah. But he doesn't understand the postal system. Yeah. He doesn't understand the culture which has created the postal system, or the history of the postal system.
But then who's got the happier life? That's what the book you brought me, The Happiness of Dogs.
That's a whole nother... We're going. I just meant in practical terms, we are like that dog who doesn't understand the thing. 100%. Rain... I mean, I know we understand it to a point, but maybe this is... I think I'm going to sound like a crazy person using this as an example, but rain comes and we just know it as rain, and we've kind of worked out what we've worked out about it, but we don't really know why the whole thing exists. A scientist would say, well, we do, it's this and this happens, but I more mean on a meta level. We don't understand why any of this actually is here.
It's a really egotistical standpoint that the human condition is, which is we're the cleverest ones here. We're the only ones that manipulate our environment. I read somewhere, and I might have mentioned this last time because I can't remember when I found it out, but the destruction that we have done to the planet and the rate in which we have killed off species is worse than when the meteor hit the Earth and destroyed most of the civilization and species. Not civilization, but most of the species. When the dinosaurs were made extinct, humankind has already done worse than that. And we've been here, like I say, a speck of time. So the thing that we're proud of, that we manipulate our environment and that means we're really clever, I don't think we should be so proud of it. And I think it's just such a weird human flaw to think that we're the best thing here. Again, it sends people into absurdity, but
I don't think it needs to. So, and maybe this is where right thinking is. The thing is, you can know all of that and you can accept all of that, but that doesn't mean that you have to go and live in a cave.
Yeah.
And I think that's where this is a much more modern version of this. This certainly isn't a Buddhist principle, but it's certainly something that I've heard people talk about. It's that you can appreciate the absurd.
Yeah.
Right. Camus talks about this, right? I mean, you've read more of this than I have. You can appreciate the absurd, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you yourself are absurd or that your life is absurd. You can accept the fact that basically the human race is a disease on this planet and that we're all just doing damage and that really there's no reason for us all to be here. But that is kind of a separate. You can put that in a different context. Your right thinking is, okay, but while I'm here, how do I make this worthwhile? How do I create a life with meaning? How do I, and the way that you do that is by treating other people well, not fucking bickering all the time, not insisting on being third on when you deserve to be second on.
But yeah, no, you're right to bring Camus up, I think. He, in the myth of Sisyphus, before the actual story of the myth, there's an essay about rationally humans should kill themselves. It's a rational discussion of suicide.
Welcome to the Sober Punks podcast.
Yes, but he said, like, if we accept that life is absurd, then the only rational answer is to kill oneself. So why don't we kill oneself? And he makes the argument for all sides of that. And I may have completely misunderstood it, but one of the big themes because there's various essays in the myth of Sisyphus, but one of the main takeaways was kind of exactly that. If everything's absurd, then live in the moment, and not just live in the moment, but realize what's real and not, and try and get away from self-deception.
Well, the very myth itself is my understanding anyway, and again you can tell me if I'm wrong because you've read more about it than I have, but is that exact thing. That's what the myth is, isn't it? It's a man who's forced by the gods to push a big boulder up a mountain forever, and every time he gets to the top it rolls back down to the bottom and he has to do it again. And so that is obviously a metaphor for our lives. And so more or less, and I'm really simplifying it, but more or less he learns to enjoy the process of pushing the rock up a hill.
Well, I've heard a different bit about it recently. I've read a different bit about it, and maybe I've missed this from the myth. It's not that he learns to, is that as part of his punishment, or this is one of the discussions, is it punishment or is it the gods being kind? The gods cast a spell on him so that he does enjoy himself. That's one reading of it. I mean, I don't know if that's explicitly said in it, but it's something I've read recently. Maybe it's John Gray or maybe it's Mark Rowlands that has talked about it, because they're the books I've read since. But one of the quotes that I really like about it, which I don't think you have to know that or not, is that I think it might even be the last quote, or it's definitely what Camus at least at some point says, is we must imagine him happy. Something to that effect. I've misquoted that, but it's something like we must imagine him happy.
Okay,
so it's one of them things that, like, whether he is or not, what is the point in assuming he's having a horrible time? It's all perspective. You could let's just pretend we're having a nice time here. But that's also absurd.
But that, so going back to be careful who you pretend to be, because you are who you pretend to be. Exactly. What I take from that is that we must imagine that ourselves are happy.
Yeah.
You personalize that, right? Because that's, it's a myth. So it's both about the world and it's about your inner world. And so in that context, if you imagine yourself happy, then I'm not suggesting this is a cure for depression or anything. I don't mean that. It's a much more obscure concept than that. But if you pretend to be happy, then you will be happy.
Yeah. I mean, there'll be people that, let's go to the Matrix. Like if you found out that it was all a fucking...
Let's not go to the Matrix.
No, but you know what I mean? But that's one of the questions in that, isn't it? It's like if you found out that it all wasn't real, then what would you want? Would you want the real one that makes you miserable, or would you be happy to just pretend and be happy? I don't know.
Well, so I think Buddhism has an answer for that. So because of the nature of mindfulness and the nature of living right there in the moment is that it wouldn't matter if it changed. The idea is that you're enjoying the process. Yeah. So you're going through your life and whatever, I mean, and enjoying isn't really the right word, but whatever you're being faced with, good, bad, indifferent.
You remain equanimous.
Equanimous, well, exactly that. So fundamentally, this is what I often think, because people talk, we listen to a lot of philosophers and read a lot of philosophers and what have you, and they talk a lot about the Matrix. And I often think that it's like if you're dealing with what is coming at you mindfully, then no matter what it is, you're dealing with it in the exact same way. Yeah. So if you take the red pill or the blue pill, I don't know which one is I don't go in for any of that stuff, but whichever one opens your eyes, then you're just presented with a new reality that you're still dealing with in the same way that you were dealing with the old reality.
Yeah.
Equanimously.
I mean, also in the let's not keep talking about the Matrix, but at that point where he sees it all as numbers and, code, that's meant to be him seeing reality as it truly is. So say, for example, that'd be the equivalent of being enlightened. Like you can finally see everything for what it really is. However, in a blockbuster film, that just leads to a big fight scene. So,
but of course, there's a lot of people that spend their life sitting in front of screens that look like that. That basically dedicate their life. I mean, right now, particularly, if you work in your success, you're a success if you sit in front of a computer screen all day.
True. I mean, I was definitely referring to it as a pure metaphor.
No, I understand. But what I'm saying is that there are people that are finding, maybe not joy, maybe joy isn't the right word, but there are people that would see that as a success.
Yeah, true.
If that, and again, I'm using this very metaphorically, but if that's reality, well, that is some people's reality, because if you sit in front of a computer screen all day, then what's the difference between that and living in the Matrix?
True.
What's the difference between reality being a computer? I don't think it's the Twilight Zone.
I was definitely trying to do that.
I don't know if the Matrix has got it.
It's got Rage Against the Machine at the end. Anyway, that's all I know. Let's not.
Let's
no
not.
more Matrix. No more Matrix. Like you say, though, it does come up all the bloody time in all of this philosophy stuff. And another place where one comes up, Neo, the one. Anyway, let's not do that.
We've all listened to John Bevere.
I know.
What's your fourth point or third point?
There was
You've
the
already
third.
done fourth.
I know. I missed it out. It's just something that I think is quite handy. It's just another one of those thinking points for mindfulness. It's called Hello Habit Energy.
Hello.
Hello. And it's just about realizing when we're doing things compulsively and without thinking, that's not necessarily a good thing. It's about trying to notice when those things are happening. And that's why it's called Hello Habit Energy. In the same way as, hello, negative thought, I see you. I'd like another one. A better one even. So it's about realizing when we're just doing things compulsively and habitually, and once you realize it, it's a bit like in mindfulness or in meditation, when you realize you've mind wandered, the realizing is the powerful bit. So it's about the habit energy going, hello habit energy, I've realized I'm doing something compulsively, which I would say is my intuition, but it's not. It's not real. I've paused it now, and it's about then taking that moment to be in the moment.
And I think that we live in a time where there's an awful lot of compulsive things around.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, we're at a time where probably we're freer than humans have ever been in some ways. You could argue that, but I mean, in comparison to, the vast majority of time, we're freer to do things and have things and what have you. But those things have just brought us a load of things that compulsively we get addicted to. I'm reading a book right now about porn addiction, and, that's... you fundamentally could paint that, or a lot of people do paint that in this really positive way. It's kind of like, oh yeah, well, in the past we've always been really censored, and we should be positive about sex and stuff. And so here's all the porn that you could ever want at your fingertips within 5 seconds. And what's happened? Well, no one leaves their houses anymore. No one's having sex anymore. There's all these problems. Loads of people are addicted to it, and it's the same with social media. Like, there's this brilliant thing where you can continuously be in contact with all of your friends, and now all of a sudden, oh fuck, I've not left my house and I've not been in contact with my friends, and I'm just addicted to it. So compulsive behavior in that context, I think, is something which we all need to be very aware of. And it's also, it makes me think of John Vervaeke often talks about the chocolate cake that he wants to eat. He sees the chocolate cake and he can num it. It's not a very good John Vervaeke impression, but
it's close.
Or not. And it's about making a decision. That's where in a way, this is really basic, in a way that's where right view comes in. So if right view is, no, I'm a healthy person, I'm not going to eat the chocolate cake, or I'm not a person that eats chocolate cake, then right thinking or right intention is slightly easier. The intention is, I'm not going to eat that chocolate cake that's right in front of me.
And it's all, again, it's feeding back on each other, because actually it's also about catching the thought. So it's about not just compulsively or habitually going to do it without thinking, which is what people do all the time. It's like, just fuck it, I'm just going to eat that. Before you know it, you've finished a pack of biscuits and you didn't even realise you'd opened them.
Yeah.
Or before you know it, you've opened Instagram and 2 hours have flown by because you didn't do anything with your actual intention and actual awareness. And again, all of these things are different little prongs of the Eightfold Path, but they do all feed each other.
And it's important to say there, I think, that intelligence in the version of intelligence that we understand has nothing to do with that.
Yep.
You can be the smartest person in the world, but there's a complete disconnect between the bit of you that can have a massive high IQ and be able to do loads of amazing things, and also who can just get lost in Instagram, or who can also just like overeat to a ridiculous extent. It has nothing to do with intelligence. It has to do with something else. I think right thinking is not about being smart necessarily, although I think maybe there's an element to like, well, no, I was going to say an element to like being well read, for example, that might improve it, but I don't think that's true.
No.
I mean, I think if anything that might influence right view, but right thinking is much more practical than that. It's the stuff that you it's the intention, it's the motivation, it's the stuff that you do or don't do.
And I think it's just having a full, again, awareness pops up somewhere else, but I really like the way that Thich Nhat Hanh has kind of laid it out as these 4 things. It's about, catching your initial thought, being present, asking what am I doing, and being really present with it, catching the habitual things and the things that you just automatically do, and then after all of that, trying to replace all of that with not replace it, but like instill some intention of care and love for other people, and all these things end up feeding each other. But all of this is practice, and all of this is
discipline.
It's really, discipline and awareness, and that's why when you do mindfulness, when you do meditation, or when you contemplate any single one of these things, it doesn't feel like it's immediately doing these things, but it's little by little sitting there and being aware of your breath will impact on whether you have immediate thoughts, will impact on how kind you are to other people, and how much you might purposefully waste your time in a negative way. It all impacts on each other in this really massive feedback 8-spoke wheel.
Yeah, and I think Brad Warner talks about how there's this really like circular thing about this as well, which is that fundamentally, particularly within the context of just meditation, right thinking is thinking about not thinking. Right?
Oh my God, I have this exact thing.
Oh, right.
It's a Zen koan. It's a well-known statement in Zen. Think non-thinking.
Yeah.
Which is,
Which, of course, is it's an impossibility. I mean, it is very much a Zen koan, and that's wonderful. And what you should all now go and do is spend a couple of hours with your eyes closed thinking about whether you can think without thinking, and that you'll probably come out the other side
crazy.
Yeah. Talking like we've been talking for the last hour and a half. But I think there's something really basic about this as well, which is very much just a practical thing about meditation. Being able to think about not thinking, or i.e. being able to meditate in some way and train your thinking or your thoughts, is a really powerful thing for how you then live your life. Yeah. We talked about this a little bit, I think, on the last episode, but it's about... So if we talk about the Goenka side of things, you brought it up earlier, about not... So if you feel good, not desperately wanting to feel good, and if you feel bad, not desperately not wanting to not feel bad. Yeah. That's the power of what you can do with your mind. Yeah. And it's very much, it's Stoic philosophy, it's Buddhist practice, it's probably it's prayer in a lot of ways, it's lots of things, and we covered that a little bit on the last episode.
It's all based in kindness as well. There's something I picked up in one of the books, I can't find exactly where now, but having those thoughts, it's not about, and this comes to the craving and aversion thing, it's also about being kind to yourself when these thoughts come up, because it's a little bit like what you were saying. A thought just appears. It's about really detaching from those thoughts. This is going to sound like excusatory for people thinking really horrible things, but it's about getting.
Well, everybody thinks really horrible things all the time. But it's about, that's what partly what discipline of being a human being is.
Yeah,
we have monkey brains. Sometimes it's like you were talking last episode about how you've got a real problem with old people or something.
Yeah, and unconscious bias.
You've done a test. It's like we've all got things like that. And we all say that we haven't got things like that, and that's good. And we haven't got things like that because we pretend we don't have them.
Yeah.
And that's discipline. That's about saying, oh my God, I'm being really unreasonable here. I've just met this person and I hate them for no reason at all. This is me.
But I think it's exactly that. And I think it's in every way being kind with yourself, because if you identify the thought, then the thought exists. But the idea is to, let it come, let it go, and not identify with it. And eventually it dissipates into obscurity. Like if something comes up and you go, oh my God, why did I think that? I must be a horrible person. Well, that's another thought that you've just had. And it just begets and begets and begets. Whereas the thought is meant to come up.
That's thinking about thinking.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas,
Oh
but
my God.
If a thought comes up, you're meant to go, oh, okay, that's a thought. Even calling it a negative thought has already put a judgment on it. So you're meant to just kind of... And it's easy to do this with bad, because no one wants bad thoughts. And again, putting bad on it is already saying it, which is why, aversion is something to... We're quite easy at like, okay, for example, in Vipassana, if you have pain, it's the easiest thing to work with, because you have a pain, you detach from it, you know that it will pass, and you feel... And it's hard not to let this run away with it, but you feel good when you get through it. However, the feeling good is also what you should avoid. But it's the craving one that you also have to balance out. Like when things feel really good, you have to also remind yourself, well, actually, this is going to end. And have I done anything? This is just happened. I haven't done anything to deserve this. It's just happening. And so I have to also let it go, because it will end. And I'll feel sad when it goes. It goes both ways.
There's an element of responsibility about that, isn't it? Like, as in you're taking responsibility for your own thoughts and your own feelings, and you're dealing with them. So you're not, it's kind of... I can't think of any other way to put it but to say it's kind of the opposite of a victim mindset. You're not saying, oh, woe is me because horrible things happen to me and therefore I think this way and it's not my fault. You're saying, oh shit, this aspect of how I think, or this thing that I've just thought, or this thing that I used to think, or my understanding of the world is wrong. I need to do something about it. I need to take responsibility for the fact that I've had this thought, or I've had this feeling, or I've had... And I'm going to do something about it. I'm not just going to say, I'm not going to say, for example, oh, I've got pain. It's kind of like, oh, I've got a bit of a back pain. I'm going to moan about it to my beloved wife for months and make her life a misery, right? You can either do that or you can take responsibility for that pain. Maybe responsibility is a weird way of looking at that. And maybe do something about it. Maybe... I think I've gone off piece a little bit, but it's kind of like there's an element of responsibility in this. I think the element of responsibility comes from the sitting and doing this practice. Like, I don't necessarily think it's even as like direct as I've had this thought, so now I must deal with this thought. Right thinking is to not have the thought at all, or to acknowledge that thought is not the making of you. But you can only do that with right effort and with actually doing it and taking the, it is a very responsible act to live within the Eightfold Path and do active practice. That's kind of what I was getting at. Yeah.
So I think it's about going, we all have good and bad thoughts. The practice of not attaching, not trying to avoid the bad ones and not trying to cling on to the good ones is the responsibility part. Because it comes back to your idea of luck. Like, we lucked out being born at this time in these countries, assuming people who are listening are probably in pretty well-off westernized countries. That is luck, pure luck, that we're born at this time, to be able to be talking through microphones that are out on the internet. And it's just crazy.
You need to take responsibility of the bad aspects of yourself or your personality. And bad is, I'm using in a completely generalized term. I mean, there is no such thing as bad as such, but the more negative aspects of yourself, in order to want to take part in a practice which is going to improve them. So the opposite of this, I suppose, would be to say, I'm an individual and I believe these different things, and therefore I am absolutely right, and everyone else is just going to have to work themselves around those. And I don't care. It's about me. If I go to work and there's something there that I don't like, I'm just not going to be happy with it. Now, of course, there's something to be said for that if it's something really serious. But most of the things that we talk about in that context are like silly things.
Yeah.
It's kind of like I expect my band to be third or fourth on the bill, or the other way around, first or second on the bill of every gig, right? It's about sort of taking responsibility for yourself and not just thinking that everybody else owes you something.
Yeah.
And so therefore it's really just down to you to make improvements. And the reason why I bring that up isn't to get at anybody, but it's more to say the making of those improvements, which is the kind of right thinking, the right motivation stuff, the making of those improvements makes your life better.
Yeah.
Going through that process makes you happy. It gives you something to do. It gives you a purpose. It gives you meaning. It's how we gain meaning. It's quite an obscure concept, that, but I think it's certainly something that I've learned since I started taking an interest in improving myself.
Yeah.
What initially it's quite hard because you need to pick out all of the aspects of yourself that need to be improved. But when you start improving those aspects, or trying to improve those aspects and failing most of the time, when you start doing that, then all of a sudden that almost becomes what your life is. It becomes your motivation. It becomes your meaning. It becomes...
But it's so interwoven with all of the feedback you get from doing that.
Oh,
like
no, 100%.
It's that spiral upwards, isn't it?
Yeah.
And, we've watched an awful lot of John Vervaeke and his meaning crisis theories, and this falls into that sort of thing. What you were saying about people expecting, things that don't fit into their worldview or to their liking, and it should be changed. Well, if everyone does that, then we don't have civilization. We just have millions and billions of people walking around expecting their needs to be met.
Which is what our society is currently based on.
And it's encouraged to continue being that way because that's how capitalism is going to feed and feed and feed off of us forever and ever and ever. I'm not saying that that's not the way to go, and I have no idea what an alternative is, but the only thing we can do, exactly as you said it, is change our own perspectives and our own awareness of reality that we're in, because the longer we just mindlessly mill along with it, and the longer we perpetuate this, individualism and what I need goes, and all the politics that comes with that, we're going to continue seeing all the divisions that we have.
Yeah, I'm not even sure it's about politics. It's about behaviour, I suppose, isn't it?
It's like behaviour, but
because you behave in a certain way based on, again, you're pretending to be that, so you are that. Like your behavior is affected. If you have the attitude of like the world needs to work its way around me, that's great for you.
Yeah.
And it's sort of, you could even argue it might work if 100% of the people in 100% of the parts of the world all go in with that attitude, and everyone has the same amount of power, and everyone has the same amount of status, and everybody can just do that. The problem is that A, that definitely isn't the case in the world now, and B, that's never going to be the case. Like, it's just too obscure.
It is, but there's something about the I really don't want to go crazy into this because I'm out of my depth.
We've been out of our depth since the start.
100%. I've nearly finished reading John Gray, The New Leviathans.
Yeah,
I think that's what it's called. And he's got some quite clear points on. He calls the world that we're in now hyperliberalism and how it's failing us. And it is this kind of individualistic, but it's not individualistic, but it's this grouping. How and I just really, I feel like I'm going to trip over myself in many different places and start a thing that I don't really want to start. But I do think this links, individualism and our own thinking and our own, we're becoming further divided by lots of different things that are eking into the world at the minute, like a very libertarian kind of thing, like I can do what I want as long as it doesn't harm anyone. But actually, if you only do what you want and you don't even want it, it's just your whims and just your immediate thoughts, that it's just not cohesive in the end. I don't think there has to be tolerance and there has to be compromise everywhere.
But just doing stuff in order that, and if you say it's okay as long as you're not harming anybody, right, that's kind of fine, and I get that in a way, except that that's the like lowest level of intent, isn't it?
Yeah.
So in an ideal world, shouldn't we all be saying, I want to do this and this is going to make things better for other people?
Yeah, that's
like, just I'm not harming anyone is kind of, all right, that's better than harming people, but it's not, that's not the highest level that we can attain.
It's not caring.
And like, and we've attained much higher than that in the past.
Yeah.
Through things like religion, through things like philosophy, through things like morals, really, and rules, actually, I suppose, fundamentally, although I'm not.
But none of that fits with the individualism we have now, because individualism is purely, I want what I want. And
as long as I'm not harming anyone.
Well, and that's actually kind of the like higher limits of things. Some people don't even care if they're harming everyone, so long as they get what they want.
Well, also,
like,
what is harm?
So long as I don't harm someone is kind of like the upper level of care for others.
But how you are the only person then who can decide what harm is.
Exactly.
So what I consider harm for other people is definitely different to what Jeffrey Epstein thought harm for other people was.
100%.
Right? So therefore, it's not. You can't be individualistic and make moral judgments about what hurting other people is
100%. We
live in that world.
And I just like then we're just going to open a big Pandora's box where I think it just goes quite negative. But
what it means is that everybody hold whatever beliefs everybody holds are absolute to them. And what that allows, and we talked about this I think on the last episode or one of the ones before, is like we've got a lot of people that I know have the right views that I would agree with, but they're turning into fascists. Within the context of those views. Now that's better than being Hitler, but it's still a fascist. Right? If you're willing to kill people because they say something you don't like and you're right, they still shouldn't be killing people. Like people still don't deserve to die. Sorry, we did talk about that on the last episode, but I suppose this may be why it's important to bring that up again, is that then you're the one who is deciding when people deserve to die or not. The other day I was out for a run and I ran past two people on the street, and one of them, from what I can make out, they were outside a bakery. One of them had parked up on the curb in their car, and then I think the other one must have lived somewhere near. I don't think even that near. I don't think the car was like outside their door or anything. And they were screaming at each other. And basically he was just saying, don't park on the fucking curb, and she was saying, fuck you, whatever, and they were just screaming at each other. And as I ran past them, they just said, one of them said, go and die, and the other one said, I'll go and die when you go and die. And they were they'd completely lost it. They were extraordinarily angry, like really proper angry. Like, this wasn't a joke, but
you
it
said
sounds
that you've
absurd.
never screamed with as much anger as they were at each other.
I've never been that angry in my life than either of these two people were. And the thing is that obviously they'd had this argument, and so it had got out of hand, and that's why they ended up telling each other that the other one should die. But ultimately, someone had just parked on a curb, and it finished with two people wishing death upon each other. And there was something about it that I'm not even going to really talk about it any more than that. I'm just going to tell the story. But there was something sort of metaphorically sort of appropriate about the time and place that we live in. That there's sort of this branding around or banding around of these people should die has just become so normalised. And I don't think anyone means it. No one is actually going to... Well, some people are, obviously, but very few people are actually going to go and harm anybody physically.
But then all you've done is put negative out there. Why have you wasted your energy, wasted your time, wasted your words, wound someone else up, taken part in winding someone else up?
And normalised wishing death upon someone, which is the kind of like the worst thing you can do, I think.
Like, do you actually want that person to die? Well, no, not really. Okay, well then what is the point of all of this? There's just... there's much more pleasantries that you could have been involved with that are real.
Well, you could. I mean,
look at the sky, the sun's out. Just do anything
again.
else.
Well, right view-wise, you could have just said, "Oh, someone's parked on the curb."
And then just walked into a bakery and bought a nice treat.
I mean, he was holding a croissant. He should have been happy.
No need.
There's no need to be angry when you're holding a croissant.
Do you remember that? I think it was on Pirate Day. There was an argument going on between two random people again. And there was a man that just appeared wearing Wellington boots, shorts, and he was holding a little lemon and poppy seed muffin. He's going, why is everyone shouting? And
then he vanished. I think he was an angel.
I think he was
an
angel.
He appeared. And they shut up as soon as because he just walked right through the middle of them, like a weird hippie. Why is everyone shouting?
I think it was raining. I think it was the weirdest situation ever. Pissing it down. Everyone's drunk. It's Pirate Day or Jack and the Green, and this hippie man in shorts and Wellington boots and not an appropriate t-shirt for the rain. holding a lemon and poppy seed muffin.
He was some sort of an angel.
Why is everyone shouting?
Maybe
Like,
that's what I should have
Do
done.
you know what? Fuck yeah.
If I wasn't so exhausted, I was in about the 8th mile, I would have probably done something like that, but I couldn't even talk at that point. I was crawling past them. I'm surprised that didn't stop
Can
an
I have
arguing,
your
really.
croissant if you're going to be so fucking miserable? Oh.
Well, so we've gone off piste now.
No way.
Is there any
weird.
other points you want to make before we call this a day? I think we've covered everything on my list.
Yeah, no, I think we've covered everything on my list. Again, coming back to just it's so interwoven with mindfulness, so interwoven with all the other parts of the path. I mean, it's so multi-dimensional, this thought bit, but the main things I take from it is it's every sort of thought is not a thought you should really be having, whether it's good or bad. The think non-thinking kind of sums that up in the most infuriating way, in a way. But you should also be kind to yourself on that way. So this is what I really like about our style of meditation. It's every thought that comes, it's about going, oh, I've just realised I'm thinking. And in fact, one of the books I've read says you can even mentally say to yourself, thinking, or this is a thought. Yeah, you objectify it and don't. It puts distance between you and that, because I think we identify with our thoughts so much that we can become egotistical, we can be really fucking sad. And actually, these thoughts pop into our head for no fucking reason. Actually, for tons of reasons we are not capable of understanding. So many different things. Memories, everything that we're taking in with all of our senses at any one time that we're not even conscious of. So many different things.
All of our neuroses,
Yeah,
all of our various mental illnesses,
all of our past, it's just so
shit
ridiculous.
that our great grandfather was stressed about.
Exactly. And this is the absurdity of our existence, and therefore all you can do is detach from it, realize what's real in the moment, just be, and with the intention of kindness to yourself and to others. That's what I take from right thought, right intention,
and again,
right motive.
So I mean, right thought and right motivation really does lead into the next couple of things that we're going to be talking about. So next episode we're going to be talking about right speech, which of course your intention and thinking directly affects that, and then right action, which again directly affects that. So stick with us.
Stay tuned, guys.
This is week 2 of the Eightfold Path. I hope you've got something out of it. We put this podcast out every 2 weeks, as you probably know if you're listening. Like I said at the start, if you want to tell your friends about it, please do. If you want to email us, it's shamcityroses@gmail.com. If you don't want to do any of those things, that's absolutely fine. Thank you very much for listening.
Indeed.
And have a little think about not thinking, but also thinking.
Bum, bum, bum.
And we'll see you in 2 weeks' time. Hopefully you will have got to the bottom
if
of
your
it by
mind
then.
hasn't exploded.
Bye.
Bye.